The rain hammered against the windows of the Pentagon briefing room as Admiral Marcus Kane reviewed the mission files spread across the polished table. 27 years of naval service had taught him to read between the lines of intelligence reports, and what he saw in these documents made his jaw tighten. 3 separate reconnaissance teams had gone dark in the mountains of Afghanistan over the past month. Each team had been composed of highly trained special operations personnel, yet none had managed to send even a basic status update before vanishing completely. Kane's weathered fingers drummed against the table as he studied the satellite images of the remote valley where the teams had disappeared. The terrain was brutal, jagged peaks, narrow passes, and countless caves that could hide an army. Intelligence suggested that a high-value terrorist leader named Khalil Nasir had established a fortified compound somewhere in those mountains, but 3 attempts to locate and eliminate him had failed catastrophically. The conference room door opened, and Captain Sarah Mitchell entered with a stack of personnel files under her arm. At 32, she had already earned a reputation as one of the Navy's most capable intelligence officers, though her colleagues knew little about her background beyond her impeccable service record. She moved with the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to operating in dangerous environments, her green eyes scanning the room with the same methodical precision she applied to analyzing threat assessments. "Admiral, I've compiled the profiles for the next reconnaissance team," Mitchell said, setting the files on the table. Her voice carried a slight accent that Kane couldn't quite place, though he'd never thought to ask about it. "We have 4 volunteers from SEAL Team 6, all with extensive mountain warfare experience." Kane opened the first file and studied the photograph of a young operator with determined eyes. "These men are among our best, Captain, but I'm starting to wonder if we're approaching this wrong. Nasir has proven himself capable of detecting and neutralizing our most elite units. Perhaps we need to reconsider our strategy." Mitchell moved to the large map mounted on the wall, her finger tracing the routes the previous teams had taken. "The intelligence suggests Nasir has established multiple observation posts throughout the valley. He's using the terrain to his advantage, creating overlapping fields of fire that make conventional approach routes extremely dangerous." "What do you recommend?" Kane asked, genuinely curious about her assessment. In the months since Mitchell had been assigned to his staff, she had consistently demonstrated an understanding of tactical situations that impressed even veteran special operations commanders. "A smaller team might have better success," she replied, studying the topographical features with obvious familiarity. "The previous missions used 4 to 6 operators, which creates a larger signature. A 2-person team could move more quietly, establish better concealment, and gather intelligence without triggering Nasir's security network." Kane considered this suggestion while reviewing the casualty reports from the failed missions. 12 highly trained operators had been lost, along with millions of dollars in equipment. The Pentagon was growing impatient for results, and Congress was asking uncomfortable questions about the cost of these operations. "The problem with a 2-person team is survivability," Kane said after a moment. "If something goes wrong, they have no backup, no support element to extract them. We could be sending 2 more good men to their deaths." Mitchell turned from the map, her expression thoughtful. "What if one of the team members wasn't a man, Admiral? Sometimes the enemy makes assumptions based on traditional patterns that we could exploit." Kane raised an eyebrow. "Are you suggesting we send a female operator into one of the most dangerous regions in Afghanistan?" "Captain, I respect your intelligence work, but special operations in that environment requires physical capabilities that most women simply don't possess." "Most women, yes, sir," Mitchell replied calmly, "but not all women. I'd like to volunteer for the mission." The Admiral set down the file he was reading and studied Mitchell's face carefully. She showed no signs of bravado or false confidence, just the same steady professionalism she displayed in every briefing. Still, the idea of sending an intelligence officer into hostile territory struck him as fundamentally wrong. "Captain, you're a valuable intelligence asset, but you're not trained for this type of operation. Mountain warfare, long-range reconnaissance, survival in hostile territory. These require years of specialized training that you simply haven't received. Mitchell walked to her briefcase and withdrew a folder marked with security classifications that made Kane pause. Admiral, there are aspects of my background that aren't reflected in my standard personnel file. With your permission, I'd like to share some information that might change your assessment. Kane gestured for her to continue, though his skepticism remained evident. Mitchell opened the folder and placed several documents on the table, each bearing the stamps and signatures of various military training facilities. Before joining Naval Intelligence, I completed the Army's sniper school at Fort Benning, where I graduated second in my class. I also finished the Mountain Warfare course at the Northern Warfare Training Center in Alaska, the Survival School at Fairchild Air Force Base, and a classified long-range reconnaissance program that I'm not permitted to discuss in detail. Kane's expression shifted from skepticism to surprise as he examined the training certificates. Each document was genuine, bearing official seals and instructor signatures that would be impossible to fake. How did you manage to complete all this training while maintaining your cover as an intelligence officer? The training was part of a special program designed to create deep cover operatives who could function in multiple roles, Mitchell explained. My intelligence work has always been my primary assignment, but the Navy invested considerably in ensuring I could operate independently in hostile environments when necessary. The Admiral studied the marksmanship scores from the sniper school, noting that Mitchell had achieved expert ratings with multiple weapon systems at ranges exceeding 1,000 meters. Her mountain warfare evaluations showed proficiency in high-altitude operations, cold weather survival, and long-range patrol techniques that would be essential for the Afghanistan mission. Even with this training, Captain, you'd still need a partner. The mountains are too dangerous for a solo operation, regardless of your qualifications. Mitchell nodded and opened another section of the classified folder. I'd recommend Sergeant First Class David Rodriguez from the Army's 75th Ranger Regiment. He's currently attached to Joint Special Operations and has extensive experience in Afghanistan. More importantly, he's worked with female operators before and understands the tactical advantages of mixed-gender teams. Kane examined Rodriguez's file, noting his combat experience and specialized training in mountain warfare. The sergeant had completed 3 previous deployments to Afghanistan and had earned commendations for operations in similar terrain. His psychological evaluations indicated the kind of steady temperament needed for long-range reconnaissance missions. Assuming I were to approve this mission, what would be your approach? Kane asked, though he was still reluctant to send Mitchell into such dangerous territory. Mitchell returned to the map and pointed to a ridge line approximately 15 kilometers from Nazir's suspected location. We would insert here via helicopter during a moonless night, then proceed on foot using established goat paths to avoid detection. The approach would take 3 days, allowing us to establish observation posts and gather intelligence on Nazir's compound. And if you encounter hostile forces, our primary mission would be intelligence gathering, not direct action, Mitchell replied. However, if the opportunity presented itself to eliminate Nazir with minimal risk of detection, we would be authorized to take the shot. Kane stood and walked to the window, watching the rain continue to fall in the Pentagon parking lot. The weight of command often required difficult decisions, but sending a naval intelligence officer into one of the most dangerous regions in the world seemed like an unnecessary risk. Captain, I appreciate your willingness to volunteer, but I'm not comfortable authorizing this mission. The potential for casualties is too high, and your value as an intelligence officer outweighs the tactical advantages you've described. Mitchell gathered her files and returned them to the folder, her expression remaining professional despite the rejection. I understand your concerns, Admiral. However, I believe this approach offers our best chance of success while minimizing the risk to additional personnel. As she prepared to leave the briefing room, an aide entered with an urgent message for the Admiral. Kane read the communication quickly, his face growing grim as he absorbed the contents. "What is it, sir?" Mitchell asked, noting the change in his expression. Kane set the message on the table and looked directly at her. Intelligence reports that Nazir is planning a major attack on coalition forces within the next 2 weeks. If we don't locate and neutralize him soon, we could be looking at significant casualties among our troops. Mitchell stepped forward, her voice carrying quiet conviction. Admiral, give me the chance to prove that unconventional approaches can succeed where traditional methods have failed. Sergeant Rodriguez, and I can gather the intelligence you need to plan a successful strike on Nazir's compound. Kane studied her face, seeing the same determination that had driven him throughout his own military career. The failed missions weighed heavily on his conscience, and the threat of future attacks made immediate action essential. If I approve this mission, Captain, you and Rodriguez would be completely on your own. No backup, no extraction plan, no support if things go wrong. Are you prepared for that level of risk? Yes, sir, Mitchell replied without hesitation. Sometimes the most dangerous missions require the smallest footprint. The Admiral walked back to his desk and activated his secure phone. Give me Sergeant Rodriguez, he told his aide, and prepare authorization for a classified reconnaissance mission to Afghanistan. As Kane began making the arrangements, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was about to discover there was much more to Captain Sarah Mitchell than her personnel files revealed. The rain continued to fall outside, and somewhere in the mountains of Afghanistan, a terrorist leader was preparing for war. The C-130 transport aircraft rumbled through the night sky over Afghanistan, its engines creating a steady drone that masked the conversation between Captain Mitchell and Sergeant Rodriguez. They sat across from each other in the cargo hold, checking their equipment one final time before the insertion. Rodriguez was exactly what Mitchell had expected from his file, a compact, muscular soldier with intelligent eyes, and the quiet confidence that came from years of combat experience. So, Captain, I have to ask, Rodriguez said while adjusting his night vision goggles, how does a Navy intelligence officer end up qualified for mountain sniper operations? That's not exactly standard career progression. Mitchell smiled as she cleaned the lens of her rifle scope. Sometimes the Navy invests in people who show potential for unconventional assignments. I happen to be someone who tested well for specialized training. Rodriguez nodded, though she could see he wasn't entirely satisfied with the explanation. Well, your shooting scores from Benning are impressive. Top 10% in a class with some serious competition. You check my training records? I always research my mission partners, Rodriguez replied, especially when we're going into hostile territory with just the two of us. I need to know I can count on you if things get complicated. Mitchell appreciated his directness. What's your assessment, Sergeant? Rodriguez secured his gear and leaned back against the aircraft's metal wall. Your technical qualifications are solid, but I'm curious about your actual combat experience. Have you ever had to take a life, Captain? The question hung in the air between them, and Mitchell considered how much she should reveal. Her classified background included operations that Rodriguez didn't have clearance to know about, missions where her unique combination of intelligence training and combat skills had proven valuable to national security. Yes, Sergeant, I have, she answered simply. More than once. Rodriguez studied her face in the dim red lighting of the aircraft, searching for signs of uncertainty or false bravado. Instead, he saw the same calm professionalism she had displayed during their mission briefing. Good, because intelligence reports suggest Nazir's compound is heavily defended, and we might not have the luxury of pure observation. The aircraft's crew chief approached their position and held up 5 fingers, indicating they were 5 minutes from the drop zone. Mitchell and Rodriguez performed final equipment checks, ensuring their communications gear, weapons, and survival supplies were secure. The plan called for a night insertion onto a remote ridge, followed by a 3-day movement to establish observation positions overlooking Nazir's suspected compound. Remember, Captain, once we're on the ground, we operate under the assumption that every local could be hostile, Rodriguez said as he secured his pack. Nazir has been in these mountains for years, and he's built an extensive network of informants and sympathizers. Mitchell nodded while checking her rifle's 01 final time. The weapon was a custom-built precision rifle chambered in .300 Winchester Magnum, capable of accurate fire at ranges exceeding 800 meters. She had selected it specifically for the mountainous terrain they would encounter, where long-range shots might be necessary. The crew chief signaled 1 minute, and both operators moved toward the aircraft's rear ramp. Below them, the mountains of Afghanistan stretched endlessly in all directions, their peaks shrouded in darkness and mystery. Somewhere in those mountains, Khalil Nasir was planning attacks that could kill dozens of coalition soldiers. Green light, the crew chief announced, and Rodriguez stepped into the night air, his parachute deploying smoothly in the darkness. Mitchell followed seconds later, feeling the familiar rush of adrenaline that came with parachute operations. The landing zone was a narrow plateau surrounded by steep slopes, requiring precise navigation to avoid potentially fatal impacts with rock formations. Mitchell landed smoothly, her boots touching down on rocky ground covered with loose stones. She quickly collapsed her parachute and buried it according to protocol, then moved to the predetermined rally point where Rodriguez was waiting. The silence of the mountains was absolute, broken only by the distant sound of wind moving through the peaks. "Good landing, Captain," Rodriguez whispered as they oriented themselves using GPS coordinates. "The compound should be approximately 15 kilometers northwest of our position." They began moving immediately, following a narrow goat path that wound between massive boulders and sparse vegetation. Mitchell was impressed by Rodriguez's mountain craft. He moved like a ghost, his footsteps making virtually no sound despite the loose rock surface. She matched his pace, drawing on her training in Alaska to navigate the treacherous terrain. After 2 hours of movement, they reached their first checkpoint, a small cave that provided concealment during daylight hours. Rodriguez established radio contact with their command post, while Mitchell studied the surrounding terrain through a rifle scope. The mountains were even more forbidding than the satellite images had suggested, with countless hiding places where enemy forces could establish ambush positions. "Base, this is Overwatch. Radio check," Rodriguez whispered into his communications headset. The response was immediate, confirming that their position was being tracked and that extraction helicopters were on standby if needed. Mitchell set up her observation equipment and began scanning the valleys below for signs of enemy activity. Through her scope, she could see several compounds scattered throughout the region, any one of which might house Nasir and his followers. The intelligence reports had narrowed the search area significantly, but visual confirmation would be necessary before any strike could be authorized. "Movement, 2 o'clock, approximately 800 meters, Mitchell whispered, adjusting her scope's magnification. 3 figures were moving along a ridge line, carrying what appeared to be heavy equipment. Rodriguez moved to her position and studied the figures through his binoculars. "Looks like they're positioning communications equipment. This could be part of Nasir's early warning network." Mitchell tracked the figures as they continued their movement, noting their destination and the equipment they were carrying. "Should we eliminate them?" "Not yet," Rodriguez replied after considering the tactical situation. "If they don't report in on schedule, it might alert Nasir that we're in the area. Better to observe and gather intelligence for now." They spent the remainder of the night documenting enemy positions and movement patterns, building a comprehensive picture of Nasir's security arrangements. As dawn approached, they moved deeper into the cave to avoid detection by the surveillance network they had observed. "Get some rest, Captain," Rodriguez said as he established a watch schedule. "Tomorrow night, we move closer to the primary target area." Mitchell settled into her sleeping system, though sleep came slowly in the confined space of the cave. Her mind kept returning to the mission brief and Admiral Kane's obvious reluctance to approve her participation. She understood his concerns. The operation was extremely dangerous, and her death would represent a significant loss of intelligence capability for the Navy. When Rodriguez woke her 6 hours later, the sun was beginning to set behind the western peaks, painting the mountains in shades of orange and red. "Time to move, Captain. I've been monitoring radio traffic, and there's increased chatter in the valley below." They packed their equipment quickly and resumed their movement toward Nazir's suspected compound. The second night's travel took them through even more challenging terrain, including a narrow ledge that required rope movement to traverse safely. Mitchell was grateful for her mountain warfare training as they navigated obstacles that would have stopped less experienced operators. "There," Rodriguez whispered, pointing toward a valley approximately 3 kilometers ahead. "That matches the description from the intelligence reports." Through her rifle scope, Mitchell could see a fortified compound built into the side of a mountain, its walls and towers blending naturally with the surrounding rock formations. Guards were visible at multiple positions, and she counted at least 6 heavy weapons emplacements that could engage approaching aircraft or ground forces. "That's definitely a military-style compound," she observed, noting the professional arrangement of defensive positions. "Whoever built this knows what they're doing." Rodriguez used his spotting scope to examine the compound in detail, documenting guard positions, weapon locations, and potential approach routes. The intelligence was accurate. This is a hardened position that would require significant force to assault directly. "What about sniper positions?" Mitchell asked, studying the surrounding terrain for advantageous shooting positions. "If we could identify Nazir and get a clear shot, we might be able to complete the mission without exposing ground forces to those defensive positions." Rodriguez pointed to a ridge line approximately 800 meters from the compound. "That position would give us overlapping fields of fire and good concealment, but we need to get there without being detected by the security patrols." Mitchell studied the proposed position through her scope, noting the angles and distances involved. It was well within her effective range, but the shot would need to be perfect. A miss would alert the entire compound to their presence and likely result in their deaths. "We should establish observation there tomorrow night," she suggested. "If we can identify Nazir and confirm his patterns, we might be able to take the shot and extract before his security forces can respond." Rodriguez nodded, though she could see the concern in his expression. "Captain, that's a one-way mission if anything goes wrong. Once you take that shot, every hostile in the valley will know exactly where we are." "Sometimes the mission requires accepting significant risk," Mitchell replied, echoing the word she had used with Admiral Kane. "If we can eliminate Nazir and prevent the attacks he's planning, the risk is justified." As they prepared to move to their final observation position, Mitchell couldn't shake the feeling that the next 24 hours would test everything she had learned in her years of specialized training. Somewhere in that compound below, one of the world's most wanted terrorists was planning operations that could cost the lives of countless innocent people. The mountains around them seemed to hold their breath as the two operators disappeared into the darkness, carrying with them the hopes of their commanders and the weight of a mission that could change the course of the war. The final approach to their sniper position required 4 hours of careful movement through terrain that seemed designed to kill anyone foolish enough to attempt passage in darkness. Mitchell followed Rodriguez along ledges barely wide enough for their boots, across crevasses that disappeared into black emptiness below, and through fields of loose rock that threatened to trigger avalanches with every step. "Stop," Rodriguez whispered suddenly, holding up his closed fist. Mitchell froze immediately, her finger moving instinctively toward her rifle's trigger guard. Through her night vision goggles, she could see 2 figures moving along a parallel ridge approximately 300 meters away. Rodriguez signaled for her to take cover behind a large boulder while he studied the patrol through his scope. The 2 enemies were moving with the casual alertness of guards who had walked the same route dozens of times, their weapons carried at the ready, but their attention focused more on the treacherous footing than on potential threats. "Routine security patrol," Rodriguez whispered after several minutes of observation. "They're following a predictable path along the ridge line, probably checking predetermined positions." Mitchell noted the patrol's timing and route in her mental map of the area. "How often do you think they make this circuit?" Based on what we've observed, probably every 2 hours, Rodriguez replied. We'll need to factor that into our timeline once we're in position. They waited until the patrol had moved well past their location before resuming movement toward their designated sniper position. The spot Rodriguez had identified was a natural depression in the rock face, providing excellent concealment while offering clear lines of sight to the compound below. Mitchell was impressed by his tactical eye. The position was nearly perfect for their purposes. This is it, Rodriguez said as they settled into the rocky hide. 830 meters to the main compound. Wind currently calm with slight thermals moving upslope. Mitchell began setting up her rifle, adjusting the bipod legs, and checking the scope settings for the range and conditions. The .300 Winchester Magnum was perfectly suited for this type of shot, with enough power to defeat body armor at extended range and sufficient accuracy to ensure a clean kill. Rodriguez established his spotting position and began documenting the compound's layout and guard positions. Through his high-powered scope, he could see details that hadn't been visible from their previous observation points. I count 12 guards visible, with at least 6 more positions that are currently unmanned. This place is set up like a fortress. Any sign of Nazir? Mitchell asked while calculating range cards for various targets within the compound. Not yet, but there's a building in the center that appears to be the command post. If he's here, that's where we'll find him. They settled in for what could be a long wait, taking turns on observation duty while maintaining radio contact with their command post. The hours passed slowly, punctuated only by the routine movements of guards and the occasional patrol that checked the perimeter. Mitchell found herself studying the compound's defensive arrangements, noting how professionally they were laid out. Whoever trained these people knew what they were doing, she observed during one of her observation shifts. This is an amateur hour. Rodriguez nodded grimly. Intelligence reports suggest Nazir has former military advisors, probably from various countries that aren't particularly friendly to the United States. That would explain the quality of the defensive positions. As the sun began to rise over the eastern peaks, activity in the compound increased significantly. Guards changed shifts with military precision, and several vehicles arrived carrying supplies and personnel. Mitchell maintained continuous observation through her rifle scope, searching for any sign of their primary target. Movement in the command building, Rodriguez whispered urgently. 3 figures entering. One of them matches the physical description of our target. Mitchell adjusted her scope's magnification and studied the building's entrance. Through the morning light, she could see a figure that appeared to match Nazir's height and build, though positive identification would require a clearer view of his face. I need a better angle, she said, considering their options. Can we reposition without compromising our concealment? Rodriguez studied the surrounding terrain through his spotting scope. There's a position about 50 meters to our left that might give us a better view of the command building's entrance. But moving in daylight is extremely risky. Mitchell weighed the tactical considerations. Their current position provided excellent concealment, but limited visibility of the compound's interior areas. The alternative position would expose them to potential detection, but might offer the clear shot they needed to complete the mission. We wait, she decided after careful consideration. If Nazir is in that building, he'll have to come out eventually. Better to maintain our concealment than risk exposure for a marginal improvement in position. Rodriguez agreed with her assessment, and they continued their observation throughout the morning hours. The compound's routine became increasingly clear as they watched. Guards rotated every 2 hours, supply vehicles arrived from the north along a concealed road, and communications equipment was tested at regular intervals. This is definitely a command and control facility, Rodriguez noted as he documented the electronic signatures they were observing. The radio traffic alone suggests they're coordinating operations across a significant area. Around midday, their patience was rewarded. A group of men emerged from the command building for what appeared to be a planning session in the compound's central courtyard. Mitchell immediately focused her scope on the group, searching for positive identification of their target. Second man from a left, Rodriguez whispered, providing confirmation through his spotting scope. That matches Nazir's facial characteristics from the intelligence photos. Mitchell studied the figure through her rifle scope, noting the distinctive beard, facial structure, and mannerisms that matched their briefing materials. After years of intelligence work, she had developed an eye for positive identification, and every indicator confirmed that they had found their target. Range 830 meters, wind 2 miles per hour from the east, target stationary, she whispered as she prepared for the shot. Her breathing slowed to the controlled rhythm she had learned at sniper school, and her finger moved to the trigger with practiced precision. "Hold," Rodriguez said suddenly. 3 children just entered the courtyard. Mitchell maintained her sight picture, but held fire as a group of young children ran into the area where the men were meeting. The tactical situation had changed completely. Any shot now would risk civilian casualties, which was absolutely unacceptable according to their rules of engagement. "How long do you think they'll stay?" Mitchell asked, keeping her crosshairs centered on Nazir while waiting for a clear shot. "Unknown," Rodriguez replied, studying the scene through his scope. "They appear to be playing while the adults conduct their meeting." Minutes stretched into hours as the children continued their games in the courtyard, completely unaware that they were preventing one of the most important military operations of the war. Mitchell maintained her position, ready to take the shot the moment the civilians clear the area, but the children showed no signs of leaving. "New development," Rodriguez whispered urgently. "Vehicle approaching from the north. Looks like it's carrying additional personnel." A convoy of 3 vehicles entered the compound, and Mitchell watched as armed men dismounted and joined the meeting in the courtyard. The presence of additional security would make their extraction significantly more dangerous, but it also suggested that something important was being planned. "Can you identify any of the new arrivals?" Mitchell asked while maintaining her sight picture on Nazir. Rodriguez studied the faces through his spotting scope, comparing them to intelligence photos he had memorized. Possible match on the tall man with the gray beard. Intelligence reports suggested Nazir was expecting to meet with regional commanders this week. The meeting continued for another hour, with maps being spread on tables and animated discussions taking place between the various leaders. Mitchell realized they were witnessing a high-level planning session that could provide valuable intelligence about future terrorist operations. "Base, this is Overwatch," Rodriguez whispered into his radio. "We have positive identification of primary target, plus multiple secondary targets. Request permission to engage when conditions permit." The response came back immediately. "Overwatch, you are clear to engage primary target. Secondary targets are bonus objectives only." Finally, the children were called away by their parents, and the courtyard cleared except for the terrorist leaders. Mitchell resumed her shooting position, calculating the precise hold needed for the shot. At 830 meters, she would need to account for bullet drop, wind drift, and the slight uphill angle of the target. "Clear shot, wind calm, target stationary," Rodriguez confirmed as he watched through his spotting scope. Mitchell's breathing slowed to the rhythm she had practiced thousands of times. Her finger applied steady pressure to the trigger as her crosshairs settled perfectly on Nazir's center mass. The shot had to be perfect. A miss would alert the entire compound and likely result in their deaths. Just as she was about to fire, Nazir suddenly moved toward the building entrance, momentarily disappearing behind another man. Mitchell held her fire, waiting for him to reappear in her sight picture. "He's moving toward the building," Rodriguez whispered. "You'll have about 3 seconds as he crosses the open doorway." Mitchell adjusted her aim point slightly, leading the target's movement toward the building entrance. The shot would be more challenging with a moving target, but well within her capabilities at this range. Nazir reappeared in her scope, walking steadily toward the command building. Mitchell's crosshairs tracked him smoothly, and at the moment he reached the optimal position, she squeezed the trigger. The rifle's report echoed across the mountains as the .300 Winchester Magnum bullet covered the 830 meters in less than a second. Hit! Target down, Rodriguez confirmed as chaos erupted in the compound below. Clean shot, primary target eliminated. The compound's guards immediately began searching for the source of the gunfire, but their sniper position was well concealed and at extreme range for return fire. Mitchell was already packing her equipment as Rodriguez maintained observation of the compound's reaction. "Time to move," she said, slinging her rifle and preparing for what would likely be a running firefight to their extraction point. Rodriguez continued his observation while gathering his gear. Multiple vehicles departing the compound, probably search teams. "We need to be gone before they get organized." As they began their withdrawal from the sniper position, Mitchell felt the satisfaction of a mission completed successfully. But she also knew that their greatest challenge still lay ahead. Escaping from mountains filled with hostile forces who would spare no effort to hunt down the people responsible for killing their leader. The first 30 minutes of their escape were the most critical. Mitchell and Rodriguez moved quickly but carefully along the ridgeline, putting distance between themselves and the sniper position while avoiding the predictable routes that search teams would check first. Behind them, the compound buzzed with activity as vehicles spread out across the valley, their headlights sweeping the darkness like hunting predators. "They're organizing faster than expected," Rodriguez observed as he monitored the enemy radio traffic through his communications equipment. "Sounds like they've called in additional units from surrounding areas." Mitchell checked her GPS coordinates while considering their options. The original extraction point was 12 kilometers away through terrain that was now crawling with hostile forces. "What's our alternative for pickup?" "There's a secondary landing zone about 8 kilometers northwest, but it requires crossing 2 major valleys where we'll be exposed to observation," Rodriguez replied while studying his map. "The primary route takes us through higher ground with better concealment." A sudden burst of automatic weapons fire echoed across the mountains, followed by shouting voices that seemed uncomfortably close. Mitchell and Rodriguez immediately took cover behind a cluster of boulders, their weapons ready as they scanned for threats. "Search team, approximately 400 meters southeast," Rodriguez whispered after locating the source of the commotion. "Looks like they're checking caves and hiding spots along the main ridge." Mitchell studied the approaching search team through her rifle scope, counting 6 armed men moving with the systematic precision of experienced hunters. Their equipment included night vision devices and communications gear that would allow them to coordinate with other search teams throughout the area. "We can't outrun them indefinitely," she observed quietly. "These mountains favor the defenders, and they know the terrain better than we do." Rodriguez nodded while calculating their tactical options. "We could try to circle around them, but that would add hours to our movement time. Or we could eliminate this team and continue toward the extraction point." Mitchell considered the implications of engaging the search team. Eliminating them would prevent their reporting of the team's location, but the gunfire would alert other units in the area. On the other hand, try to avoid them might lead to detection anyway, and they would lose the advantage of choosing when and where to fight. "What's the terrain like between here and the extraction point?" she asked while keeping her scope trained on the approaching enemies. Rodriguez consulted his map and GPS coordinates. 2 more ridge lines, then a descent into the valley where the helicopters can land. "If we can get past this search team, we should have clear movement for most of the route." The decision was made for them when one of the searchers spotted their tracks in a patch of soft earth. The man immediately signaled to his teammates and began moving directly toward their position, his rifle raised and ready for combat. "They found our trail," Rodriguez whispered urgently. "We need to act now." Mitchell shifted her position to get a clear shot at the lead searcher while Rodriguez prepared to engage the others with his carbine. The range was manageable for both weapons, but they would need to eliminate all 6 enemies quickly to prevent any of them from reporting their location. "On my mark," Mitchell whispered, centering her crosshairs on the lead man's chest. 3, 2, 1, mark. Her rifle cracked sharply, and the lead searcher dropped immediately, his body tumbling down the rocky slope. Rodriguez engaged two more targets with rapid precision, his suppressed carbine chattering quietly as he fired controlled pairs into each enemy. The remaining three searchers took cover behind rocks and returned fire, their muzzle flashes lighting up the darkness as bullets sparked off the stones around Mitchell and Rodriguez. The sound of their unsuppressed weapons would carry for kilometers, alerting every enemy unit in the area to the firefight. Mitchell acquired a second target and fired again, watching the man spin and fall as the .300 Winchester Magnum bullet found its mark. Rodriguez flanked to the right, using the rocky terrain to get a better angle on the remaining enemies. "Grenade!" Rodriguez shouted as one of the searchers prepared to throw an explosive device toward their position. Mitchell shifted her aim instantly, placing her crosshairs on the man's throwing arm just as he began the motion. Her shot shattered his elbow, causing him to drop the grenade behind his own cover. The explosion illuminated the mountainside briefly, followed by screaming from the wounded man. Rodriguez finished the engagement with two precise shots, eliminating the last two searchers before they could escape and report the team's position. The entire firefight had lasted less than 30 seconds, but the damage was done. Enemy units throughout the valley would know that the sniper team was still in the area. "Move now," Rodriguez ordered as he gathered his gear. Already they could hear vehicles starting up in the valley below, and radio chatter indicated that reinforcements were being directed toward their position. They ran along the ridge line, no longer concerned with stealth, as speed became their primary requirement for survival. Mitchell's mountain warfare training served her well as she navigated the treacherous terrain in darkness, her night vision goggles turning the rocky landscape into a green-tinted obstacle course. "Contact left," Rodriguez called out as another search team appeared on a parallel ridge, their weapons already firing toward the fleeing Americans. Mitchell and Rodriguez took cover and returned fire, but the tactical situation was deteriorating rapidly. More muzzle flashes appeared on ridges throughout the valley as additional enemy units joined the pursuit. The two operators were being surrounded by a growing number of hostile forces. "Base, this is Overwatch," Rodriguez called into his radio while reloading his carbine. "Primary mission complete, but we need immediate extraction. Current position is compromised, and we're under heavy contact from multiple enemy units." The response came back through heavy static. "Overwatch, extraction helicopters are inbound but cannot land in a hot landing zone. You need to break contact and move to the primary pickup point." Mitchell eliminated another enemy with a long-range shot, but she could see that their situation was becoming hopeless. "How far to the landing zone?" "Still 6 kilometers, Rodriguez replied while engaging targets to their right. "But we'll never make it with this many hostiles tracking us." A new sound reached their ears, the distinctive whop-whop-whop of helicopter rotors approaching from the east. Mitchell looked up to see two Apache attack helicopters sweeping toward their position, their advanced sensors already identifying the enemy forces scattered throughout the valley. "Overwatch, this is Guardian Angel," came a new voice over their radio. "We have visual on your position and multiple hostiles. Keep your heads down while we clear the area." The Apache helicopters opened fire with devastating effect, their 30mm cannons and Hellfire missiles eliminating enemy positions with surgical precision. The rockets streaked across the valley like deadly stars, each explosion marking the end of another threat to the escaping operators. Mitchell watched in amazement as the attack helicopters systematically destroyed the vehicles and weapons positions that had been pursuing them. The superior technology and firepower of the American aircraft turned the hunting party into the hunted in a matter of minutes. "That's what I call close air support," Rodriguez said with obvious relief as the last enemy position fell silent. "Overwatch, area is clear," Guardian Angel reported. "Extraction helicopters are inbound to the primary landing zone. You have approximately 10 minutes to reach the pickup point." Mitchell and Rodriguez resumed their movement toward the extraction point, now able to move quickly without the immediate threat of enemy pursuit. The extraction helicopters would provide additional security, but they needed to reach the landing zone before reinforcements could arrive from other areas. As they crested the final ridge overlooking the extraction point, Mitchell could see the familiar silhouette of a Black Hawk helicopter settling into the valley below. The sight of American aircraft and the knowledge that their mission had been successful filled her with a satisfaction that went beyond personal survival. "Mission accomplished, Sergeant," she said as they began their final approach to the landing zone. Rodriguez smiled for the first time since the mission began. "Outstanding shooting, Captain. That was some of the finest marksmanship I've ever witnessed under combat conditions." They ran toward the waiting helicopter, their gear bouncing as they covered the final few hundred meters to safety. Behind them, the mountains of Afghanistan held countless secrets and dangers, but one of the world's most wanted terrorists would never again plan attacks against innocent people. As the Black Hawk lifted off and banked toward the east, Mitchell looked back at the compound where Nasir had made his final plans. In a few hours, she would be back in the Pentagon briefing room, debriefing Admiral Kane on a mission that had exceeded all expectations. But first, she allowed herself a moment to appreciate the successful completion of an operation that had tested every skill she had learned during years of specialized training. The Admiral had been reluctant to approve her participation, but the results spoke for themselves. The helicopter gained altitude and speed, carrying them toward a forward operating base where hot meals, secure communications, and immediate medical attention would welcome them back from their successful hunt in the mountains. Admiral Kane stood at his office window, watching the morning traffic build around the Pentagon, but his attention was focused entirely on the secure phone in his hand. The mission debrief had concluded an hour ago, but he was still processing the implications of what Captain Mitchell and Sergeant Rodriguez had accomplished in the mountains of Afghanistan. "Sir, you asked me to compile the mission results," his aide said, entering the office with a thick folder of documents and photographs. Kane accepted the folder and spread its contents across his desk. Satellite imagery showed the compound where Nasir had been eliminated, along with detailed battle damage assessments from the Apache helicopter strikes. Intelligence intercepts revealed the chaos that had followed the terrorist leader's death, with various subordinate commanders fighting for control of his organization. "What's the current status of Nasir's network?" Kane asked while studying a photograph that confirmed the target's death. "Completely disrupted, sir," his aide replied. "Without central leadership, the various cells are operating independently and appear to be more focused on internal power struggles than planning attacks against coalition forces." Kane nodded with satisfaction. The elimination of Nasir had achieved strategic objectives that went far beyond the death of a single individual. The terrorist organization he had built over years of careful planning was now fragmenting, its carefully constructed plans for major attacks falling apart without his leadership and coordination. A knock on his door interrupted his review of the mission materials. "Come in," he called, looking up to see Captain Mitchell entering in her dress uniform, looking remarkably composed for someone who had been in combat less than 24 hours earlier. "Admiral, you asked to see me once I completed the intelligence debrief," Mitchell said, taking the seat he offered across from his desk. Kane studied her carefully, searching for signs of the stress and fatigue that should have been obvious after such an intense mission. Instead, he saw the same professional competence she had always displayed, though perhaps with an added confidence that came from proven performance under extreme pressure. "Captain, I owe you an apology," Kane began, setting aside the mission photographs. "When you first proposed this operation, I was skeptical about your qualifications and concerned about the risks involved. Your performance exceeded my expectations completely." Mitchell accepted his comments with typical professionalism. "Thank you, sir." Sergeant Rodriguez was an excellent partner, and the mission succeeded because of careful planning and superior intelligence preparation. "Don't minimize your own contribution," Kane said firmly. "That shot you made was extraordinary under any circumstances, but particularly impressive given the tactical situation and the pressure involved. 830 meters, moving target, hostile environment. That's the kind of marksmanship that wins wars. Kane opened another folder and withdrew a document bearing official seals and signatures. Captain, I'm recommending you for the Navy Cross for your actions during this mission. Your combination of tactical planning, combat leadership, and exceptional marksmanship directly resulted in the elimination of a high-value target and the disruption of a major terrorist network. Mitchell accepted the commendation with obvious surprise. The Navy Cross was the service's second highest decoration for combat valor, rarely awarded to intelligence officers operating in their supposed area of expertise. Sir, I appreciate the recognition, but this mission was successful because of teamwork between multiple units and services, she replied. Sergeant Rodriguez, the helicopter crews, the intelligence analysts who provided targeting information, everyone contributed to the final result. Kane appreciated her humility, but he had seen enough combat operations to recognize exceptional performance when it occurred. Captain, in my 27 years of naval service, I've never seen an intelligence officer successfully transition to direct action operations with such effectiveness. Your background clearly includes training and experience that goes beyond what appears in your standard personnel files. Mitchell met his gaze steadily, and Kane saw the same calm confidence that had convinced him to approve the mission despite his reservations. Sir, some aspects of military service require operational security that extends beyond the normal classification levels. Kane understood that he was being told, politely but firmly, that further questions about Mitchell's background would not be answered. In the intelligence community, there were programs and operations that remained hidden even from senior commanders who lacked a specific need to know. Understood, Captain. However, I want you to know that your performance has opened new operational possibilities that we should discuss. The success of this mission demonstrates that unconventional approaches can achieve results where traditional methods fail. Kane activated his secure computer terminal and brought up a map showing terrorist activities across several countries in the Middle East and Central Asia. Red markers indicated known terrorist leaders, weapons facilities, and training camps that posed ongoing threats to American interests. Captain, we have identified at least 12 high-value targets in this region who present similar challenges to the one you just eliminated. Remote locations, heavily defended compounds, extensive security networks that have defeated conventional special operations approaches. Mitchell studied the map with obvious interest, her analytical mind already processing the tactical challenges presented by each target location. What kind of timeline are we considering for these operations, sir? That depends entirely on your availability and willingness to continue this type of work, Kane replied. I understand that you have responsibilities in naval intelligence that may take priority over direct action missions. Mitchell considered his offer carefully. Her intelligence work was important and provided valuable contributions to national security, but the mission in Afghanistan had demonstrated that her unique combination of skills could achieve results that saved lives and disrupted enemy operations in ways that traditional intelligence gathering could not. Admiral, I would be honored to continue this type of work, provided that I can maintain my intelligence duties when direct action missions are not required. Kane smiled with satisfaction. He had hoped she would accept the expanded role, recognizing that her capabilities were too valuable to limit to traditional intelligence assignments. Excellent. I'll begin coordinating with the Joint Special Operations Command to develop target packages for the priority threats. We'll also need to identify additional personnel who can serve as mission partners. Sergeant Rodriguez has volunteered to continue working with you, but we should develop a larger pool of qualified operators. Kane stood and walked to his office safe, from which he withdrew a folder marked with security classifications that Mitchell had never seen before. Captain, your new assignment will require access to information and programs that are compartmented beyond top secret levels. Are you prepared for that level of security responsibility? Yes, sir, Mitchell replied without hesitation. I understand the implications of special access programs. Kane handed her the folder and watched as she signed the additional security agreements required for her expanded access. Captain, Welcome to a very select community of operators who handle the missions that can't be accomplished through conventional means. As Mitchell left his office to begin preparing for her next assignment, Kane returned to his review of the intelligence reports from Afghanistan. The terrorist network that Nasir had spent years building was collapsing as various factions fought for control. Their attention turned inward rather than toward planning attacks against American targets. The mission had been a complete success by any measure, eliminating a high-value target while demonstrating new tactical approaches that could be applied to similar threats worldwide. But beyond the strategic implications, Kane was most impressed by the way Captain Mitchell had exceeded every expectation placed on her performance. His aide knocked and entered the office again, carrying another stack of intelligence reports from various global hotspots. "Sir, the Joint Chiefs are requesting a briefing on the Afghanistan mission and its implications for future operations." Kane accepted the reports and began preparing his presentation for the senior leadership. The success in Afghanistan had attracted attention at the highest levels of the military hierarchy, with several commands requesting access to the capabilities that Mitchell and Rodriguez represented. "Schedule the briefing for tomorrow morning," Kane instructed, "and prepare a summary of potential target packages in other theaters where similar approaches might be effective." As evening approached over the Pentagon, Kane reflected on the remarkable turn of events that had begun with the skepticism about an intelligence officer's request to participate in direct action missions. The woman he had initially seen as a valuable but vulnerable asset had proven herself to be one of the most capable operators he had encountered in his entire career. The war against terrorism required innovative approaches and exceptional individuals who could adapt to unconventional challenges. Captain Mitchell had demonstrated both qualities in the mountains of Afghanistan, and Kane was confident that she would continue to exceed expectations in whatever missions lay ahead. Outside his window, the lights of Washington, D.C. began to twinkle in the darkness, a reminder of the millions of people who slept safely because of the dedication and sacrifice of military personnel around the world. In a few hours, Captain Mitchell would be reviewing intelligence reports and planning her next mission, ready to venture once again in a hostile territory where her unique skills could protect innocent lives and defeat those who threatened freedom. The Admiral smiled as he gathered his papers and prepared to leave for the day. Sometimes the most unlikely operators proved to be exactly what the mission required, and he was grateful that the Navy had the wisdom to invest in people like Captain Sarah Mitchell. The war was far from over, but victories like the one in Afghanistan proved that dedicated professionals could achieve the impossible when given the opportunity to serve their country.